Hi, everyone. Carter Krishnair here for the Florida Squeeze. Hope everyone's doing well, staying warm here in February. We're more than a month into Trump 2.0. It's worse than many of us expected. It's from my perspective as a liberal Democrat whose more conservative positions were that I'm a free trader and I'm an Atlanticist, I'm an internationalist. This is the worst possible scenario for me, ideologically. I know there are people on the left, people to the left of me that probably agree with Trump on more with what he's doing. In fact, I see that from some left-wing opinion leaders. But the issue I want to discuss today is the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, you have the talking heads out there in the blogosphere on CNN and MSNBC and Substack, where I'm actually a very active member. I run my soccer work now through Substack. If you're a soccer fan, check that out at beyondthe90.net. We are on Substack. But that now there seems to be spin. There seems to be excuses. The shock of November and December and the inaction of January has turned into spinning in February. Basically, hey, the Democrats still won 215 House seats. Oh, they're going to win the governorship in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger is, I think, a pretty good candidate. They're going to possibly win in New Jersey. Maybe it's Mickey Sherrill there, right? And then the midterm, they'll win the House back. So we just need to keep our powder dry. Historically, looking at what I think is a realignment, and I'm a student of history. I write about history. I think most of you know that. In fact, my book on the War of 1812 just recently came out. You can check that out. Just look it up on Amazon. The War of 1812, the Florida Fronts. And I'm completing a book with a co-author this week on the American Revolution. That's going to the publisher. The first draft is going to the publisher on Friday. So very well versed in this stuff. When I look at U.S. electoral politics, the Democrats now are reminding me of the Republicans of the 1930s. They're not necessarily the Whigs, although I do think I have my critiques of the fall of the Whigs, that the Whigs were a party that was obsessed with Jacksonian Democrats. Andrew Jackson first, personally, which, like many Democrats, have become obsessed with Donald Trump, and then eventually just Jacksonian Democrats, whether it was Polk or others. And they never had a clear ideology or a clear direction. But from an electoral standpoint, I think the 1930s Republicans are more instructive to what we see. So the Republicans flipped the Congress in 1918. 1920 was a landslide election. They had 300 some seats in the House right after the 1920 election, where Harding beat James Cox, the Democratic nominee, by a huge margin. 1924 was even worse in the presidential race, right? John W. Davis, the Democratic nominee, got under 30% of the popular vote. Robert La Follette, fighting Robert La Follette from Wisconsin, Republican senator, was disgusted by the kind of the right-wing drift of both his party, which nominated Calvin Coolidge, who might have been the most conservative president in American history, and the Democrats nominating John W. Davis. So he ran as a third-party independent, as a progressive, and he got 16 or 17% of the vote. So took away largely from the Democrats. Or I don't want to say that, because, again, La Follette was a Republican, and I think the Democrats had proven not to be a progressive party at that point. They had turned their back on the progressive, even the populist progressivism of William Jennings Bryan and of Woodrow Wilson. So the Republicans dominated the 1920s. 1928 election, Hoover wins. Obviously, Al Smith is nominated by the Democrats. He's Catholic. That hurts. That hurts a lot at that point. He won a handful of states because he was Catholic. That was the reason. But as a result, the Republican majorities, even though they had been chipped away at in the midterms in 22 and 26, 28, you even see a bunch of southern states go Republican, and you see some Congress people elected from the South who were Republicans. Very rare in that era. It's the only time Florida went Republican, I believe, after Reconstruction until Eisenhower, for example. Only time we voted Republican was for Hoover, because of Al Smith being Catholic. That was the simple explanation. But the Great Depression comes, and the 1930 election is basically a stalemate. It kind of leans Democratic. But then what happened in 32? Landslide, realignment. And what you saw was a Republican Party that didn't know whether it was supposed to be pro-business and attack Franklin Roosevelt as being socialist and attack the New Deal as being socialist. You saw 100 days that transformed American society, American life, and permanently transformed American government and politics, which is similar to what we're seeing in the early stages of Trump, even though someone like me disagrees with it. I think most of you watching this probably disagree with much of what Trump and Elon Musk, is basically the oligarch plutocrat who's the co-president, or at least pulling the strings of the president, are doing. But it's reshaping American government. It's reshaping American history. It's reshaping our institutions. The Republicans had nothing to say but bitter things in 1932. And so in 34, it got worse for them. In 36, it got worse for them. 38, they begin to snap back. There are a lot of democratic fights. Famously, Roosevelt had tried to pack the Supreme Court, hadn't gotten his way, tries to primary Democrats who voted against him, loses a lot of those primaries. 1942 is a pretty good cycle for the Republicans, but they don't take back either the House or the Senate. They come close. They came very close in the House, actually. The Democrats were very lucky to hold the House in 1942, which was an election in the middle of a war. And one of the theories about 42 is if Operation Torch, which was the invasion of North Africa, if that had been moved up by a month, the Democrats maybe would have won 20 or 25 more seats. So they still hang on to a majority. 44, they win again. 40, they win. 44, they win. 46, the Republicans win. Landslide, do-nothing Congress. 48, they're ushered out, and Truman is reelected. 52, the Republicans win in a landslide. They win the presidency. They win both houses of Congress. 54, Congress flips back. It was an era where if the Republicans won elections, they were corrected 2 years later. 42, they almost won the House. They lost a bunch of seats in 44, a bunch of those seats. 46, they win both houses. They're out in 48, and they lose the presidency. 52, they win big. 54, they lose big. And by the time you get to 58, the Democrats have a 20-seat advantage in the Senate, and the Republicans don't take the Senate back till 1980. They don't take the House back until the 1990s, as you know. And my fear is because the Democrats are in the same way as the Republicans. The Republicans in the 1930s and 1940s were, do we become this reactionary, pro-business, proto-fascist, or it wouldn't even be proto-fascist because fascism was in vogue in Europe, this kind of neo-fascist or American fascist party? Or do we become Me Too liberals? Since the liberals are carrying the day in the Democratic Party, and they never figured it out. That fight went on until I think it was decisively quashed in 68. And the Republican Party, even though I think Nixon was a fairly moderate to liberal president in some respects, the rhetoric changed in 68 and 66, 68, and right through then the Reagan Revolution in 80, and politics were remade in the U.S. I think the Democrats are in the same place. Are they going to be a moderate, centrist, neoliberal party that looks for free market solutions to counter Donald Trump's authoritarianism and protectionism? Protectionism, which is by definition anti-free market. Or are they going to become a left-wing party concerned about race and woke and racial quotas and all this stuff and trans and LGBTQ, stuff that has clearly been repudiated by the electorate? But are they going to just double down on that? Just like the Republicans in the 1930s, the pro-business, proto-fascist or American fascist views, free market, promote business. That had been clearly repudiated by the electorate in 1932. But a lot of Republicans didn't get the memo, and they kept going on that front line. Even the 52 primary between and the convention between Bob Taft and General Eisenhower. General Eisenhower, who probably had been a Democrat or independent, and had some very clear alignment with the New Deal to a certain extent, versus Taft, who still was fighting the battles of Herbert Hoover and Calvin Coolidge. My sense is Democrats are going down that same direction. There will be a wing of Democrats who continue to fight for woke, continue to fight for things that the electorate have clearly said they don't like. And then there are other Democrats who probably haven't gotten the message that there are lots of Americans who aren't in love with the free market and capitalism anymore, which I think is a bit unfortunate, but it's the reality, and we see the data. And they're going to fight that fight. And neither side seems to want to listen to the other side. Both sides want to blame the other side. There will be de facto default elections the Democrats win in 2-year waves, like 38, 42, 40. Those were where Republicans did well, but they didn't win back because they were in huge deficits, right? Which the Democrats aren't right now. But like 46 and 52, those two in particular. There will be elections like that where the Democrats win in waves. It could be 2030. The Democrats win in a wave election. They capture both the Senate and the House, majority of governorships. And then in 2032, it's canceled out by a presidential race where the Democrats are trying to tick all these boxes with who they nominate. And the Republicans nominate just a go-getter, J.D. Vance or somebody. That's where we're headed. If you want to know where the Democrats are headed and why I'm saying the party is basically dead, look at the Republicans in the 1930s. I know the Republicans trace their lineage back to Lincoln and to Bleeding Kansas and 1956 and the anti-slavery movement. The actual Republican Party, modern Republican Party, was born out of this struggle where the Democrats dominated national politics. So that's electoral politics. Let's talk about voter registration for a minute. In every state where there's voter registration, every single state, whether it's a blue state or a red state, Republicans are making gains and Democrats are dropping. People do not want to self-identify as Democrats anymore. Too many people do not want to self-identify as Democrats anymore. And that's a very bad sign. And so in the portion of history, American history I'm talking about, the Democrats had a huge voter registration advantage in places where you registered by political party. Huge voter registration advantage in the 30s and 40s. In fact, the Democrats still had a huge voter registration advantage in the 1980s as Ronald Reagan was being elected in 2 landslides, in 80 and 84. And actually, George H.W. Bush basically in 88, more or less a landslide, especially seeing what's happened since 92, the competitiveness of presidential elections. So the Democrats have been traditionally the majority party in this country, whether they win elections or not, since 1932. Until now. Until I would say the last 2 years. And we're seeing a trend line, voter registration, voter identification, electoral success, messaging, kind of coherent messaging. We're seeing this all go like this. And it's not going like this. It's going like this. So I think the party is basically done. They will win isolated elections. I'm not saying they're never going to win a national election again. They will potentially retake the House in 2024, potentially retake the Senate in 2028. Sorry. No, I've got my years wrong. 2026 for the House, 2030 for the Senate potentially. Maybe win a majority of governorships in 2026 or 2030. But I think the trend line is clear. Unless the party has a comprehensive rethink, reboot about what they stand for and make the American public actually want to identify with them and have a coherent strategy, they're done. They're done for the foreseeable future.